Hello, everyone, and welcome back to actually our very last lesson of this unit. We're going to be talking today about volume, the prisms, and the cylinders. Okay, so let's review what is volume. So, volume is the amount of space that an object occupies. Good. And then prism. Well, what is a prism? A prism is a three-dimensional space or shape with straight edges. So a three dimensional shape with straight edges. So, for example, a sphere would not be a prism because a sphere does not have straight edges. And same with a cylinder. We're going to talk about cylinders separately from prisms today as well. But a cylinder is not considered a prism because a cylinder doesn't just have straight edges, right? The cylinder has a circle base, and a circle does not have straight edges, right? Or same with a cone we talked about. Well, a cone doesn't have straight edges, right? A cone also has like a circle base, right? And so those are some examples of non-prisms. So let's talk about what are prisms. Well, there's the rectangular prism. The cube is a prism as well. There's also the triangular prism, and then a cylinder, which is separate from prisms. So a cylinder is not a prism, but we will be talking about both prisms and cylinders today and how to find the volume for them. So let's go through the formulas. The formula for the rectangular prism is length times width times height. Now that's actually the same as for the cube because cube is really just where length and width are the same, right? And height, they're all the same thing. And so cube is actually, every cube is also a rectangular prism, and therefore the formula is going to be the same. The only difference is we could rewrite this as just length cubed or width cubed or height cubed because the length and the width and the height are all the same in a cube. However, we can't do that for just any rectangular prism because some rectangular prisms, in fact, most rectangular prisms, are not going to have this property where really length, width, and height are the same thing. They're usually different in most rectangular prisms. And then we have the triangular prism, which is where we find the area of the base and then multiply by the height, right? So um, we have 1/2 base times height times the length, right? Because we want to find, now why is it a half? Because we have a triangle base here. And so we must divide by 2 in order to get that area correct. And then as for cylinder, we have pi r squared h, right? Which if we think about it, pi r squared is what? Well, pi r squared is the area of the circle. So it's the area of the base, of that circular base, times the height. So that makes sense as well. So when it comes to these formulas, you can memorize them, absolutely, or you can even just kind of understand why the formulas are the way they are, and then you'll never forget these formulas. Okay, so let's talk about the volume for each of the following. Well, first we've got to identify what type of shape this is. So this is a rectangular prism. Rectangular prism. And from what we just talked about, we know that a rectangular prism has a volume of length times width times height, right? In this case, that means 4 times 12 times 6, right? We have length 4, width 12, and height 6. Not that the order matters because it is multiplication, so it's not actually going to make a difference what we put where, but we need to make sure we have the length and the width and the height, and we're multiplying all three together to get 288 centimeters cubed, or cubic centimeters. Good. Now for number 2, let's identify what shape this is. This is a cube, right? How do we know it's a cube? Because these lines indicate that the length, the width, and the height are all the same, and we can see the height is 5. So therefore the volume is just going to be length times width times height, or you could write it as just, height cubed or length cubed or width cubed. because it's going to be 5 times 5 times 5, right? Because all three of these are the same. Or we could just say length cubed or width cubed or height cubed. Any of these is correct for cube. So we're going to get 5 cubed, which is 125 cubic meters. Very good. All right, let's move on to number 3. So what type of shape is this? This is a triangular prism. And the triangular prism's volume is 1/2 base times height times length. Okay, so let's plug those numbers in. Our base is 10 and our height is 4 and the length is 20. So therefore we're going to have, let's see, 10 times 4 times 20, which is 800, divided by 2 is 400, so 400 cubic meters. All right, and let's try this one here. Volume, this is also a triangular prism. So the volume is going to be 1/2 base height length. But wait, we have 4 dimensions here that they've given us. So which 3 do we use? Well, we have to make sure that we're not using anything that doesn't need to be used. So what do we need to use? We need to use the base and height of the triangle. And we can see that the base of the triangle is 12, right? So I'm going to highlight 12 in purple. That's our base of our triangle. The height of our triangle is 16. So there's our height. And then what's the length? The length is this one, right? The length is this one, this 10 centimeters. This 20 centimeters is just the hypotenuse of the triangle, and we don't need the hypotenuse of the triangle, or sometimes it's known as the slant height, but we don't need S, the slant height, for this. And so 20 is just an extra piece of information that they put in there to confuse us, right? To make us really think about, well, what is necessary in order to find the area here and to not use anything else. And so we actually don't need to use the fact that, 20 centimeters is the slant height. Good. So now let's plug in those values. Now 20 centimeters, I will say it could be useful. Like let's say they didn't give us either the base or the height of the triangle. We might need to use that 20 centimeters to find one of those things. But in this case, they actually already gave them to us, so we're okay. Okay. So 1/2 times 12 times 16 times 10. Let's see what that's going to give us. So that's going to be 12 times 16 times 10 divided by 2 is equal to 960 centimeters cube, or cubic centimeters. Very good. Let's move on to number 5. So number 5 says we have 16 as our diameter and 12 as our height, looks like. So this is what kind of shape, first of all? This is a cylinder. So this isn't a prism. This is a cylinder. And the volume of a cylinder is pi r squared h, right? So the area of the base times the height. Now, we know that the diameter is 16 and the radius is always half the diameter, right? So radius we must find first. Radius is diameter over 2, which in this case is 16 over 2, or 8. So that means that our radius is 8. So we have pi 8 squared times 12. So if we do 8 squared, which is 64 times 12, we're going to get 768 pi. And then that's going to be our exact answer. But what about our approximate answer? If we multiply that by pi, or 3.14592, we will get 2,412.74 if we round to 2 decimal places, and that's cubic meters. So there we go. There's our approximation. Depending on what you prefer, you could do your approximation or the exact answer. But do keep in mind that if the question specifically wants, rounding to a certain number of decimal places, make sure you do go to this next step. And that if the question specifically asks for the exact answer, that's the one with pi, right? Because, when it comes to pi, we're going to have to round at some point. We can't really, it's not really possible to write the exact value for pi in decimals. We must just write like the pi symbol to do the exact value for that. Okay, very good. All right. Let's move on to number 6. So first of all, what type of thing is number 6? I should say. What type of what type of shape? Well, this is a triangular prism. So let's write that down. Triangular prism. Awesome. Okay. And what is the volume of a triangular prism? Well, volume is equal to 1/2 base times height times the length. Now, what values do we have here? Well, we have the base, right? We have that the base is 8. We don't have the height. We need to find the height. And we have that the length is 15. So somehow we need to find out what is the height. So we can use Pythagoras' theorem to find the height. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We'll use Pythagoras to find out what the height is. So if we know that this full thing is 8 centimeters, that means half of this is 4 centimeters. That half of this is 4 centimeters. And that this one is 5 centimeters. And so we'll be able to figure it out that way. Okay, now I'm just realizing this is not to scale very much because the answer is going to end up being 3, but don't worry about that. This is not a to scale drawing. So what we must do essentially is we're looking for the answer to this triangle. We have 4 centimeters here and 5 centimeters here, and we want to know the height. We don't know our height. So going back to Pythagoras' theorem, we know that a squared plus b squared equals to c squared. And in this case, it's going to be h squared plus 4 squared equals to 5 squared, which means h squared is equal to 25 minus 16, which means h squared is 9, which means h is 3. Or it's also possible that you recognize this as just the classic 3, 4, 5 triangle and automatically put it in as 3, and that is fine as well. But either way, the height is equal to 3. And now I recognize it doesn't really look to scale, but that is the correct answer based on the information that we're given here. Good. So now that we know the height is 3, we can plug it in here. We can plug in that base is 8, that height is 3, and that length is 15. And then we can solve from there. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so we're going to get 0.5 or 1/2 times 8 times 3 times 15, which is going to be 180 cubic centimeters. And there we go. All right, well, that is it for the volumes of the prisms and the cylinders, because this next page is actually just an extra page of the same exact questions with the same exact values. So that is it for Unit 4. Our very last unit in this course is EQAO preparation, which has to do with all the units, and it's going to be a really good foundation. So whether you're someone who is writing the EQAO or you are not, I do advise you to go through the next unit, as there will be a test on it. And also it really ties together everything you've learned and will help you for the future to understand that material. So we will see everyone back for the EQAO prep in Unit 5. Great work, everybody, and we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.